Street Racer Underground, released in 2020 for Nintendo Switch and other consoles courtesy of InLogic Games and Jandusoft. This is a very simplistic driving game where you drive a car past other cars and passing checkpoints in order to keep playing before time runs out. Or it could be a very simplistic racing game where you outrace other drivers on the road in order to claim first place and win big money to buy additional cars, upgrades, paint jobs, etc. Or something. I don't know. In any event, this is a game where you drive along a straight road, switching lanes, overtaking cars to build your nitrous meter, and then firing said nitros for a temporary boost of speed that is immediately nullified whenever you crash into another car. Something that I found fairly easy to do due to the somewhat low visibility of these vehicles. Actually, to call Street Racer Underground a driving game of any sort, let alone a racing game, is being extremely facetious, as all you're really doing is moving your car left or right by tapping left or right on the D-pad to switch lanes and pressing a button to fire nitros when your meter is full. You do not have acceleration, you do not have brakes, there is no turning. It is this ever-straight highway in the middle of this endless megalopolis, avoiding cars that you could barely see, and passing checkpoints or claiming first place in the rare race. There is also a police element that pops up if you crash into one too many cars, but that almost never comes into play because games don't usually last that long for it to come into play. In fact, the only reason I know of this mechanic is because of the tutorial that turns up whenever you start a fresh new game, which is kind of abrupt. Street Racer Underground has two modes of play, the Endless mode and the Race mode. Endless mode is what I've said before, pass cars and build nitros to pass checkpoints to extend the timer so that you keep on playing. The farther you go, the more farther apart the checkpoints are, but the more money you ultimately earn, that can go into buying upgrades and new cars and also pay entry fees for the championships. Look, if you want my advice on how to approach this game, don't. Go play something else. But barring that, play a few endless rounds until you've earned enough money to buy one of the mid-level cars, because the ones you start off with ain't getting the job done, and they don't upgrade far enough to be worth a damn for the serious racing experiences. Street Racer Underground, which has no relation to the Street Racer game that appeared on the Super Nintendo ages ago, comes across as something that feels more suited for the mobile platforms due to its simplicity and its constant need to grind in order to earn money to buy some of the more superior cars to gain a minuscule increase of performance in more ways than one. Hell, this is easily something that could have been recreated on the Atari 2600 given what little you actually do gameplay-wise. In fact, the graphics would actually be an improvement in that regard because at least the visibility would be better. It's one of those games that you play for a bit, realize how shallow it is, and yet you keep playing because, yeah, just a little more, just to see if you could do a little better. That sort of experience is perfectly suited for the mobile market, and as a mobile game it would have been fine. But as a Switch title you buy for a couple bucks, not so much. And as a game for the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, on which Street Racer Underground also got released for, you know, on platforms with plenty of superior racing games to choose from, nah, definitely not. Street Racer Underground has some pretty bland graphics. I can somewhat forgive the poor quality cars that seem like they came from the Nintendo 64 era and dumped into a bucket of glossy varnish to make them look shiny, since you're mostly seeing these at a distance. But what I cannot forgive is the overall dark aesthetic of the game. The constant night setting gets boring after a while, and even worse, a lot of the cars tend to be difficult to make out since they're all so dark and easily blend into these street colors, making it easy to crash into them, especially when you have the nitro on. Some of these also look to be driving backwards, and for fuck's sakes, do any of these assholes not have nightlights? They figured this shit out with Enduro 38 years ago. As far as sound is concerned, you only have two songs, one hip-hop sort of tune in the garage and a techno beat thing during gameplay. They're generic by the standards of those genres, and they start to grade after a while. Fortunately, you could turn the music off and just stick with the sound effects, which aren't that better. Every crash sounds the same, every engine is loud, and nah, fortunately you could turn that off, though whenever you pass the checkpoint that still makes an audible sound, so but whatever. Overall, Street Racer Underground is a very simplistic and quite frankly, very shallow game that would have been better suited for the mobile market, considering how simplistic the gameplay is. This, compounded with the dark graphics and generic stock music, makes for a less than stellar car game. At best, it's somewhat playable, marginally. At worst, it's tedium incarnate. Best skip this one and stick with one of the better racers on the system. Just about any one you could think of will suffice. So, yeah.